Hi everyone, this is Catherine, and for the first Tetrad I'd like to share with you, I decided to look at STEM and STEAM education. My school, I teach in an arts and technology regional program in Peel District School Board, and we have actually started to move the focus of our program from just arts and technology into the STEAM model because our principal thought that that would be very appealing to the parents. And it has actually been very successful at drawing some new people into our program. So it's something that I've been working on and interested in for the last couple of years. Um, and the other thing that sort of sparked me was the idea that there's just some tension between sort of the goals of STEM and STEAM that I wanted to kind of unpack a little bit. And the idea that, we talk about solving these grand problems, eradicating conflict, medical breakthroughs, solving climate change through STEM. But when the conversations are happening, one of the really big points that's, pretty much in the same breath is the idea of economic benefit and having a highly educated workforce that can respond and work and be an economic powerhouse. So that tension for me was worth exploring a little bit. So my fancy fonts for you here today, we're going to start in the enhanced quadrant with this one. And I wanted to share that you start off with that idea of 21st century skills and competencies. There are lots of great diagrams out there. I like this one because I like the way that they stated the five petals, resilience especially. And for me, STEM and STEAM should be definitely about creativity, definitely about communication. But I like that idea of resilience because that's not one of the traditional 6 C's of 21st century skills and competencies, like creativity, confidence, communication, collaboration's often talked about in there in those 6 C's. But I love the idea that resilience was in this particular diagram. Um, STEAM definitely works on things like being a critical thinker, problem solving. It helps people learn how to have those creative sparks and follow them through to build connections between the left and right hemispheres of their brain. And for me in the arts and technology program, this is the way I think. And I really like this image because it sort of sums up who I am and what I do. In my program and myself, what I value. I had a really hard time, for example, deciding between going down a science path and doing biology in university or going into theater. I kind of wanted to do both. And not that there's many opportunities for jobs that combine both, but in my work, I definitely do. And I often try to find that sort of middle ground where there's a really clear blend. It's not just one or the other. So I'm not code switching all the time. Sometimes I'm really living in that sort of tidal zone. What's that zone in the tide? That's where I live, and where the riparian zone, where there's the salt water and the fresh water mixing together. That's my life. That's my brain. So I like this image for talking about how STEAM can really do that, and STEAM in particular, not STEM. I like how STEM and STEAM programs are working on improving gender and cultural diversity. Lots of money going into, for example, coding programs for girls, getting girls involved in engineering. There's lots of programs out there that are just, especially from the private sector, that are really supporting and encouraging and nurturing girls into new fields and trying to bridge that gender gap. There's a lot of appeal about STEM and STEAM. As I said, we had our enrollments go up, way up when we started to mention STEAM in our recruitment for our program, and kids love it. They love fooling around. They love playing with the maker spaces and playing with the the Lego robots, and getting involved with maker education, gamifying things, doing lots of experiments, math manipulatives. I love this image because this is kind of, for me, what STEAM is really all about. It's a big mess. Sometimes it's a good thing because you're really into your learning and lots of exciting things are happening. But it also sort of leads us down into maybe the root of overconsumption or not planning carefully how to use materials. So that's one of the things that I've been working a lot on in STEAM in my program is really teaching kids how to use materials and to value and to not waste. Um, this is again sort of heading into retrievals a little bit and finding sort of that it's kind of a bit of both. I felt so. This quote I really liked because one of the issues with STEAM that or STEM in particular, is that I have is the lack of humanity, the lack of literature, the lack of spirituality, the human stories that are not present, forgetting our history. So STEM in and of itself for me is very limiting, and I really like the fact that STEAM is an attempt to kind of bridge that, to bring back the literature, to bring back the humanities, to bring back that creative spark and that aesthetic beauty back into the learning, and not just fooling around in labs with robots all day. So I like this quote because I felt like it sort of spoke to the need for imagination in STEM and STEAM. So now moving into reversals truly. I wrote this, you can click on the link, and I'll try to include the link if you haven't read it yet. I did write a paper for one of our previous courses, and I presented at a conference in my board about STEAM and trying to find the heart, because to me, STEM is just tools, and STEAM is where the heart is and where the purpose and the meaning lies. And so I kind of explored and redefined the acronym of STEAM in the document that's attached. And I thought it was really important to really look at that in the reversal. So another thing that's missing, from STEAM or from STEM is the idea that function is trumping form. So without that aesthetic beauty, without that appreciation for art, you might end up driving a Yugo, and that would be a disaster. So, I feel like that's one real um, uh, lacking points in STEM. As well, that idea of history, not knowing where you were and not remembering and understanding the context of where you were, you end up on a path, maybe not that far off of where we are today, where people have really forgotten what it was like, 75 years ago on D-Day. Yet tomorrow is D-Day. And, if we don't have those stories, if we don't have that long memory, science is not always going to take us down the right path. And they're going to be filling vacancies for sure. They're going to be making some money and driving an economic powerhouse, but to where and for what purpose? Is it for a better world, or just really for some, dineros in your pocketbook? Okay, going now into retrieve. So I wanted to think about who really does benefit from STEM and STEAM programming, although there is lots of money going into bridging gaps and trying to address some of the inequities and the inaccessibilities of STEM and STEAM. This is the 2016 Nobel laureates. Looks much the same as it did 50 years ago. This is a shop class from about 50 years ago. So this would have been sort of my dad's era. But my granddad's garage was the men's domain. I wasn't really allowed to go and tinker in there when they were, working on a car, or my granddad was building in the shop. It was the men's domain. The uncles would be there. My younger brother would be there. My dad, my grandpa. But, we would be in the kitchen, sitting around the kitchen table, peeling potatoes for dinner. So, going back into the past, what did STEM look like? It was learning at home. It was learning on the farm. It was your dad and your grandpa teaching you things, your mom teaching you things. I like the singer one because, sewing is definitely having a bit of a renaissance. And it has included a lot more men into it lately, but, there's still definitely a gender divide when we think about some of the traditional work roles. Now, finally, going into the obsolescence quadrant, some of the things that are going to be, going by the by are great. Like, see you later, sage on the stage. That's a really great thing to say goodbye to. We are not the end all be all. And so getting rid of that in STEAM is great. Saying bye-bye to high stakes testing culture, another really great thing that will come by the by. And, the idea of, well-rounded, diverse approaches, like we've talked about before, might also be something that's going by the by, which is not a good thing. But, if we keep that STEAM approach, I think we might actually be okay.